More of a team player? I repeated, keeping my tone even while my fists clenched beneath the desk. My boss, Raymond Torres, leaned back in his ergonomic swivel chair, that irritatingly confident grin never leaving his face. Look, Natalie, you're a powerhouse, no one's questioning that, he said. But Brianna, she lights up the room. She knows how to make people feel comfortable. She's just easier to work with. Too focused on performance. That was the verdict, not my lack of results, not a missing skill set, just that I didn't make enough small talk in the break room. I'd been with Phoenix Analytics for 6 years. I was 29 when I joined, fresh out of grad school and eager to prove myself. Now, at 35, I'd become the backbone of our New York office, landing multi-million-dollar contracts, optimizing the firm's internal systems, and cutting costs by over 30%. And yet, here I was, bypassed for a promotion in favor of someone who showed up late and left early, but laughed loudly at every executive joke. I stared at Raymond for a moment, watching him pretend to sort through files, expecting me to nod and swallow the rejection. Instead, I reached into my satchel and pulled out a white envelope. I understand, I said, calmly placing it on the desk. Thank you for your honesty. He raised an eyebrow. What's this? My resignation, effective 2 weeks from today. His expression cracked. Natalie, hold on. Let's not rush this. It's not rushed, I interrupted, cool and composed. You are right. I am focused on results. That's why I'm leaving. What Raymond didn't know, what no one in that office had cared to notice, was that while I was pushing the firm's numbers up, I was also building something of my own. A consulting agency, fully funded, fully operational, and already profitable. I wasn't walking away in defeat. I was stepping into ownership. If you felt every word like it was your own story, don't forget to subscribe and follow along, because what Natalie does next will prove that walking away isn't giving up. It's leveling up. Something that would make Raymond's promotion decision look like the joke it truly was. As I walked out of his office, I felt every pair of eyes in the Manhattan office follow me. Word spread fast on the 18th floor of Phoenix Analytics, and I could already imagine Brianna mentally picking out throw pillows for my cubicle. Still, I held my head high, returning to my desk with calm precision. Because I knew something they didn't. Inside my resignation envelope was a second document. One that would make Raymond choke on his morning espresso. The next 2 weeks were everything you'd expect, and then some. Brianna strutted through the office like she was born to lead, fake laughing louder than ever, making rounds to flaunt her new title. One morning she perched herself dramatically on the corner of my desk. Natalie, I hope you're not upset. I mean, I know how hard you worked for that promotion. I looked up from my screen, calmly finishing my download of every report, metric, and performance audit I'd authored over the past 3 years. Not to steal, my standards were too high for that, but to document what I'd actually built. Here. No hard feelings at all, Brianna. You'll be amazing, I'm sure. She smiled, already believing she'd won. But what she didn't know was that the results everyone praised me for had never come from company resources alone. 3 years ago, I began developing a new project management system out of frustration, really. It started as a personal tool, but it grew into a data-driven powerhouse. I had already filed for a patent 6 months ago. The approval? It had come just last week, and in that second page of my resignation letter, I'd outlined exactly how many millions in client retention and efficiency gains it had brought the company. A week later, an email hit my inbox. Robert Kim, CEO of Solstice Tech, our fiercest competitor. He'd heard I was leaving. Our coffee meeting turned into a strategy session. He wasn't offering me just a job. He offered a partnership, full creative control, and equity. He slid a contract across the table. We've been waiting for someone like you, he said. Someone who knows that results matter. As I signed, I knew this was what real recognition felt like. On my final day at Phoenix Analytics, just as I turned in my security badge, Raymond called me into his office one last time. The smug confidence that had defined him was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped expression that bordered on panic. Natalie, we need to talk about this report you included in your resignation, he said. waving the stapled pages in the air with hands that were visibly trembling. "Why didn't you ever tell us about this system?" I took a seat across from him, calmly smoothing out the sleeve of my blazer. "I tried, Raymond. 3 times, actually. I requested meetings to discuss a rollout plan for improved efficiency protocols. You said, and I quote, 'We're focusing on building a friendlier team dynamic.'" He looked down, flipping through the report again, his face growing paler with every page. "But this is game-changing. The cost savings, the automation models, the client satisfaction metrics, and you already patented it?" I nodded. 6 months ago. "And I've accepted a leadership offer from Solstice Tech. They're looking forward to implementing it across their global operations." Raymond slumped into his chair, deflated. "Solstice Tech? Natalie, no, you can't. That's our top competitor. What about loyalty?" "Loyalty?" I laughed softly. "You mean the kind you showed me when you handed my promotion to someone who couldn't deliver a weekly report on time?" I stood, letting my voice remain calm but cold. "The kind of loyalty you showed when you dismissed my proposals because I wasn't loud enough in meetings, or because I didn't fetch coffee during brainstorms?" He opened his mouth to object, but I cut him off. "If you'd looked past your bias, if you'd actually paid attention to my results instead of who was laughing at your jokes, this would have ended very differently." "We'll match Solstice's offer," he blurted. "We'll promote you to senior director. Just stay." I shook my head. "It's not about the title. It's about respect. It's about being seen." As I walked out of his office for the last time, I heard him scrambling to call upper management, no doubt trying to figure out how to contain the damage. But it was too late. The patent was mine, the contract was signed. And as for Brianna, well, she was about to find out that taking credit is easy. Delivering results, not so much. That evening, while boxing up my things, I found a sticky note left on my monitor. "Sorry to see you go. Keep in touch. Brianna." I smiled, crumpled it, and tossed it in the trash without a second thought. Oh, Brianna would be hearing my name again. The whole industry would. My first day at Solstice Tech felt like stepping onto a different planet. No cramped cubicle, no flickering fluorescent lights. Instead, a corner office with sweeping views of the Hudson River and a glass nameplate on the door that read, "Natalie Reyes, Director of Operational Strategy and Innovation." But the real shift wasn't in the title or the view. It was in how I was treated. Robert Kim, Solstice's CEO, called a full staff meeting to introduce me. But it wasn't some stiff announcement. He told my story, highlighted my innovations, praised my data-driven systems, and made it crystal clear I wasn't there to blend in. "Natalie isn't just joining us," Robert said as the entire conference room quieted. "She's bringing a game-changing methodology that's already proven to save time, reduce costs, and drive client loyalty. She has my full trust, and she'll have yours too." The contrast to Phoenix Analytics was staggering. There, I was the ghost who saved everyone's numbers. Here, I was the architect of something better, and I was finally seen. But the real victory came 3 months later. I was in the middle of a strategy workshop when my phone buzzed, a text from David Tran, one of the few colleagues I actually respected back at Phoenix. "You might want to check the business wires. Something huge just dropped about Phoenix Analytics." I excused myself, walked to my office, and opened my laptop. The top headline made my breath hitch. "Phoenix Analytics faces 30% client loss after Q2 collapse." The article was brutal. Delayed projects, over-budget launches, 3 of their biggest clients gone. Their operational metrics had tanked, and their internal systems were described as fractured and outdated. But one quote stood out. From one of my former clients. "The level of service has nosedived," said Thomas Kwan, CEO of Terra Nova. "We used to trust Phoenix with high-volume rollouts. Now, we can't even get basic timelines honored. It's like they've lost the backbone of their operations." I smiled. They had, because I was that backbone. The structure they took for granted was the one I spent 5 years quietly refining. The one Brianna had no clue how to maintain. Another buzz, a second text from David. "Brianna's having a meltdown in the break room." I leaned back in my chair, sunlight pouring in through my window. I didn't need revenge. I had results. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or outshined by someone who didn't earn it, subscribe to the channel, because Natalie's rise is just beginning, and what happens next will leave the whole industry talking. She's drowning, and Raymond's finally catching on that Brianna has no clue how to keep anything afloat. I set my phone down, the corners of my mouth twitching with irony. Brianna had spent 2 years polishing her image, parroting other people's ideas, and smiling her way through meetings. But now, she had to deliver, alone. And Raymond, who had gambled on charisma over competence, was watching the consequences play out in real time. Meanwhile, I had far more important things on my plate. At Solstice Tech, the system I built wasn't just working, it was transforming everything. Project turnaround times had been cut by more than 50%. Client satisfaction scores were soaring. Our internal efficiency metrics, the highest in company history. Robert had already greenlit my plan to expand the system company-wide, and negotiations were underway with 3 major firms interested in licensing the platform. One crisp Thursday morning, 6 months after I'd left Phoenix Analytics, I walked into my office to find Robert standing beside my desk, newspaper in hand. "Have you seen this?" he asked, holding it up. The front page headline read, "Phoenix Analytics faces full restructure amid talent exodus and system failure." I took the paper and nodded. I saw the announcement. They're tearing the place apart. The board finally realized how badly they mismanaged their talent, Robert said. They tried to rebuild your system internally. But they didn't understand the architecture, I finished, already knowing where this was going. They thought it was just a tool, but it was the thinking behind it that made it work. Robert smiled, the kind of smile that tells you he sees the long game. "Which is why the board unanimously approved your promotion," he said. "Starting next week, you'll be our Executive Vice President of Strategic Innovation. They've seen the impact you've made. They want you driving the future." Warmth bloomed in my chest. This was what it meant to be recognized, not for appearances, but for actual contribution, for vision, for value. That afternoon, as the sun dipped low over the city, an unexpected email popped into my inbox. From Raymond Torres. Subject, apology. Natalie, I hope this message finds you well. I'm sure you've heard what's happened at Phoenix. I wanted to say I was wrong. Not seeing your value was the biggest mistake of my career. Your system was the backbone. We didn't realize it until it collapsed without you. I resigned last week. Before I left, I made sure the board knew exactly where we failed, by not listening to you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Brianna resigned a month ago. Turns out managing actual deliverables is a little more complicated than parroting buzzwords in meetings. The email from Raymond continued. "I know it's too late to change what happened, but I wanted you to know you were right. Results do matter. I just wish I'd seen that sooner. Best regards, Raymond." I read it twice. There was a time when a message like that would have cracked something open inside me. A time when recognition, even late, would have been all I needed. But that time had passed. Now, sitting in my executive office at Solstice Tech, sunlight catching the edge of my framed patent certificate, I felt calm. Behind me was a plaque from our record-breaking quarter, and beside it, a recent Forbes article naming me one of the top 10 women redefining innovation in tech. Raymond's words were a footnote. My story had moved on. I hit reply and typed, "Raymond, thank you for your email. You're right, results do matter. I wish you well in whatever comes next. Natalie." After sending, I glanced around my office. Every detail here had been earned, not handed to me, not bargained for, earned. The next morning, I called an all-team meeting. As the room filled, I looked around at faces that actually wanted to be there. Engineers, designers, project leads, people who respected the work, not just the politics. When the room settled, I stood. "Today, we're diving into our next major launch, but before we begin, I want to tell you a story," I said. "Not about systems or software, but about value. About seeing it in others. About not letting anyone define your worth but you." As I spoke, I saw heads nod, eyes widen, people leaning in, not just to the content, but to the lesson. They got it. They understood that this company, our company, wasn't built on smoke and mirrors. It was built on substance, on the courage to speak up even when no one's listening. Later that evening, I drove home, and as I passed Phoenix Analytics, I slowed. Their massive logo, once a symbol of everything I wanted, looked faded now, outdated. A for lease sign hung in one of the upper windows. They were downsizing, again. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt grateful. Grateful they hadn't seen my worth. Grateful they'd pushed me out. Grateful because they unknowingly forced me to build something better. Because sometimes the biggest opportunities come wrapped in rejection. Sometimes being too focused on results is the exact mindset that sets you apart. And sometimes the best response to being undervalued is to build something so powerful they can't ignore you anymore. My phone buzzed. A message from David lit up the screen. Phoenix Board is asking about you. They're wondering if you'd consider returning as CEO. I stared at the message for a moment, then slowly typed back, "Thanks, David, but I'm exactly where I need to be." And I meant it. Because real success isn't just about proving people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about honoring your own potential, even when no one else sees it. It's about refusing to shrink just to fit into someone else's vision. As I pulled into the driveway of my Brooklyn brownstone, I thought about all the other Natalies out there. Quiet professionals doing exceptional work, getting passed over because they weren't flashy enough or political enough. Maybe this story, the one I lived, would reach one of them. Maybe it would be the push they needed to stop waiting for permission and start carving their own path. Because sometimes, rejection isn't a wall, it's a launch pad. You take the insult, you take the doubt, and you use it as rocket fuel to build something stronger. Something that turns "you're not enough" into "you're irreplaceable." That evening, as I sat in my home office reviewing global licensing proposals for our now patented system, I felt a deep sense of clarity. Peace, even. Above my desk hung the words that Raymond once said, like an insult. "You're too focused on results." Funny thing is, he was absolutely right. And that focus, it brought me here. To leadership, to innovation, to purpose. To the place I was always meant to be. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking this road with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Tell me, have you ever been overlooked? Have you ever been told you were too serious, too ambitious, or too focused? Because I know what that feels like. And I want you to know, you are not too much. You are not invisible. You're not imagining it. Your value doesn't decrease just because someone failed to see it. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing, not just to follow my journey, but to join a space where we celebrate people who rise through adversity, who refuse to settle, and who fight to build something real. I want to hear your story too. Leave a comment below and let's talk, because if my journey can be a mirror for yours, maybe together we can remind each other that rejection isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of your own chapter. One where you write the rules, where you define the win. Keep building, keep believing, and never let anyone make you feel like results are a bad thing. They're just scared of your potential.